You're with News 5 tonight. A reminder of the big story this Monday, the Committee of Inquiry into last year's Little India Riot has released its report. It found that the fatal bus accident involving an Indian national was the primary cause of the riot, but three other factors caused things to escalate. First, misunderstandings among the crowd. Second, the cultural psychology of the rioters. And third, alcohol as a major contributing factor. The report has three main recommendations: improving procedures and resources to the police force, better management of areas where foreign workers gather, and tackling alcohol consumption and public drunkenness. Well, to assess the findings and recommendations by the Committee of Inquiry, I have with me MP Tin Peiling. She is a member of the Government Parliamentary Committee for Home Affairs and Law. Welcome to the show, Peiling. Now, the report suggests that weak police procedures was one of the reasons for the riot and recommended a whole slew of measures, including better training, better communication. Now, what do these recommendations tell us about the inability of the home team to handle the events of the night, and what has been done to implement these recommendations since then?
Well, I think to be fair, the COI report did say that for the most part of it, the police has done a pretty effective job. I think in the end, it boils down to the ability to communicate on the ground, to read the situation and to make judgment calls in such a dynamic situation. And so I think in this case, in terms of communication, the radio sets, for example, the frequency were clashing and there were no cameras on site. So what was, the decision was based on one perspective, and the commander could only see from his own perspective. And so I think that had an impact on his ability to make judgments in that very instance then. All
right. Now, another report, the report also cited misunderstandings as one of the key causes of the riot. What do you think can be done to resolve these kinds of differences that could range from anything from cultural misperceptions rather, to even the way the law enforcement was perceived to have acted that night?
Well, I think it all boils down back again to the communication, and there is a need for this bridging, a very strong bridge, like for example, and we have a lot of non-government organizations reaching out to these groups of migrant workers. Even the employers themselves have a role to play to explain to them the norms in Singapore, and that what might be happening in their own countries, for example, may not apply in Singapore. I think at the end it also boils down to trust, trust towards the authority. And I think in this case, one of the contributing factor could be that they thought that the authorities are siding the driver and the timekeeper, and that they are not devoting enough resources to help the victim, and so they felt a sense of injustice and they want to come in and to try to help their fellow worker out of that situation. And so I think it's important that on the one hand, organizations, for example, Migrant Workers Center, the MOM, as well as the employers, have to educate the foreign workers, especially when they first come to Singapore, the norms, what can be done, and to fully appreciate the effectiveness of our authorities in Singapore. And at the same time, I think our authorities, police forces, for example, will also need to hone their abilities to read the ground and understand the psychology, when a mob occurs or during in such a riot situation where it's very dynamic. What is the first thing that they need to do? Whether it's to give assurance, to calm them down, or to come in and assert command and control in the first instance. I think this is something that the forces probably will have to sharpen their skills in.
Right, you mentioned earlier forming maybe support groups for such foreign workers. What else can we do to foster a sense of inclusiveness between Singaporeans and the foreign worker communities?
I think actually foreign workers are working amongst us. They provide goods and services to Singaporeans, and there are many opportunities for us to get to know one another. So I think on top of having non-government groups, for example, to have platforms to help bridge this gap, I think also, perhaps it would be useful that, even the day-to-day encounters, whether it's a cleaner in the HDB estate or even in the service industry, perhaps it would be useful to sometimes, have a conversation with them, understand what their thoughts are and where do they come from, for example, so that there will be a better appreciation of how they see issues. Because same issue, different persons, different background, we may have a different take on the thing and therefore have different responses. I think through knowing one another, that humanizes that interaction, humanizes the other person beyond just a service provider. And I think that goes a long way in helping us to, better understand one another and react to one another.
Very, very quickly, Peiling.
Yes.
A lot to digest in this report. How far do you think this report will go to assuring Singaporeans that such an incident like this will never happen again and that the home team is prepared to deal with it if it does?
Well, I think the COI report has made clear its recommendations. The next step, and I think it would be a very crucial, important step, is how the government responds to this and to what extent it's implementing these measures. So I think if that is done well, it will instill back, or if not, a stronger sense of trust and confidence within the population. And so I think that would be the most important step that we should pay attention to. And I believe that in the coming Parliament, DPM will also be sharing more on this in Parliament.
Tim Peiling, thank you so much for sharing your views with News 5 tonight. Well, Deputy Prime Minister and Home Affairs Minister Teo Chee Hean said the committee's invaluable insights and suggestions will help the home team keep Singapore safe and secure. He added that the government's response to the report will be heard when Parliament meets next Monday. The government is expected to accept all 8 recommendations.